Djibouti, a tiny country in the Horn of Africa, has somehow become the center of a high-stakes game played by the world's superpowers. The United States, China, France, Japan, and others all have military bases here, and their interactions tell a fascinating story about modern geopolitics. How did Djibouti become the focal point of such intense rivalry? And what does it mean for the people who live there? Stick around to find out. And if you love uncovering hidden stories from around the globe, be sure to subscribe. Now, to understand why superpowers flock to Djibouti, we have to talk about its location. Djibouti sits on the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, a narrow passage that connects the Red Sea to the Gulf of Aden and eventually the Indian Ocean. This strait is one of the world's most crucial maritime choke points, with around 10% of global trade passing through it. Control this choke point, and you have a strategic advantage over global shipping routes. This importance became glaringly obvious after the Suez Canal opened in 1869, linking the Mediterranean Sea with the Red Sea. As a result, European powers, mainly France, recognized Djibouti's significance and colonized it, establishing a small military presence. But Djibouti's real moment on the world stage arrived much later, during the modern era. The rise of military bases. In the early 2000s, after the 9/11 attacks, the United States ramped up its fight against terrorism, and Djibouti became the perfect staging ground for its operations in the Horn of Africa and the Middle East. In 2002, the U.S. established Camp Lemonnier, a former French Foreign Legion base that turned into a sprawling complex of over 4,000 personnel. This move marked the start of Djibouti's transformation into the world's most sought-after piece of real estate for military bases. But the Americans weren't alone for long. In 2017, China made history by opening its first overseas military base in Djibouti, located just a few miles from the U.S. base. The Chinese base, capable of hosting thousands of troops and large naval vessels, serves as a key part of China's Belt and Road Initiative, its ambitious plan to expand trade and infrastructure globally. Meanwhile, France, which had maintained a presence since the colonial era, continued to operate its base, and Japan joined the mix in 2011, establishing its first overseas military installation since World War II. Even Italy has a presence here, albeit on a smaller scale. So what happens when all these superpowers set up camp in the same place? It's not always a harmonious coexistence. Let's start with the most notable rivalry: the US and China. The proximity of their bases has led to plenty of friction. For instance, there have been reports of Chinese personnel using laser beams to interfere with US pilots landing at Camp Lemonnier, which led to a diplomatic complaint from the United States. Additionally, American officials have expressed concerns that China could use its base to monitor US military operations. It's not just the US that's worried. Other countries in Djibouti also keep a close eye on China's growing influence. Yet, despite these tensions, there's an unspoken understanding that everyone needs to maintain a level of respect to avoid direct conflict. After all, everyone's here for a reason and nobody wants to rock the boat too much. One of the most fascinating aspects of this military convergence is how foreign troops live their daily lives in Djibouti. You might think that the presence of so many soldiers would lead to lively interactions with the local community, but it's quite the opposite, especially for American troops. Fun fact: American soldiers stationed at Camp Lemonnier rarely shop for groceries, water, or any other supplies in Djibouti. This separation creates an invisible barrier between them and the local population. The situation is different for other countries, though. French soldiers, with a longer history in Djibouti, are more accustomed to interacting with locals. They often visit cafes, restaurants, and shops, and some even learn to speak Somali or Afar, the local languages. Chinese soldiers, on the other hand, have a mixed approach, and they maintain a certain distance but are more involved in infrastructure projects. The Chinese government has financed numerous construction projects in Djibouti, such as the Djibouti-Addis Ababa Railway and new ports, which helps foster a connection with the local population. It's a strange thought, isn't it? Being surrounded by soldiers from different countries, but never having a chance to get to know them? So, how does Djibouti benefit from all this? For a country with few natural resources, the presence of foreign military bases provides a vital source of income. Each base pays rent to the Djiboutian government, and these funds play a crucial role in keeping the country's economy afloat. However, there's a catch. While the money from military bases brings in millions of dollars, there's a risk of becoming over-reliant on this income. What happens if one of these superpowers decides to leave? Djibouti would be left with a significant gap in its finances. Moreover, the influx of superpower interest has led to a delicate political balancing act. Djibouti's government must maintain good relations with all these countries, even when tensions flare up. It's a tricky situation that requires diplomatic skill and a steady hand. One thing is certain: Djibouti's role in the global arena is only becoming more significant. Its location, infrastructure, and ability to maintain relationships with multiple countries make it an irreplaceable asset. But there are risks too. Djibouti may be small, but its influence on the world stage is anything but. As superpowers continue to vie for influence, the story of this little-known nation offers a fascinating glimpse into the complexities of modern geopolitics. The interactions between countries, the bases, and the cultural divides make Djibouti a living, breathing example of how global politics plays out on a daily basis. So what do you think? Will Djibouti continue to thrive as a strategic hub? Or is it just a matter of time before things take a turn?